Hello and welcome to Call to Arms, and thank you for answering the call. And welcome to another episode of Battlecry. I'm joined by a guest, a familiar face on the channel. We've got Simon back. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, all.
And how are we?
We're good. We're just back from holiday, so we're still recovering from that. But
All right.
apart from that, all is good.
Fantastic. So yeah, I do remember asking you, Simon, or pestering you rather, about when we could do a call. And you're like, right, we'll have to do it the first day I get back from holiday. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. So I hope the jet lag's not too bad, and
We're,
we're feeling fresh.
we're good enough.
We're good enough. Perfect. So yeah, so the tonight's episode is going to be about 40k. We're going to be talking about what the current state of affairs are. We'll have a kind of a brief look back at how we got to this point. We'll talk about the kind of the current meta, where we think it's at, and then we'll maybe make some bold predictions for the future as well. But yeah, before we get started, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the video. If you could please like and subscribe, and also comment in the video, it helps other people find the content. And as you can see, we're also on numerous different bits of social media as well, Twitter and Instagram mainly for the kind of main updates, and you'll find those details below in the description. And yeah, we also have a Patreon if you'd like to take a wee look at that as well. So, without further ado, let's crack on, shall we? So, the state of 40k. Now, if we kind of think about, here we go. We're going to be talking about a brief history of ninth edition. So this is the edition that we've been playing for the past 2 years. Before that, obviously, 8th edition. And that was the kind of edition I first kind of properly got into. I would say got into competitive 40k. Going to tournaments and things like that. It's not just casual gaming with your pals, in a spare room on a coffee table. It was actual gaming. So yeah, we're kind of going to have a wee kind of chat about that. So released in July 2020, and we're going to talk about the kind of the main changes that happened between changing from 8th to ninth, because there was quite a lot of substantial changes that occurred, wasn't there, Simon?
Yeah, I mean it. It wasn't as drastic as a change from seventh to eighth, but there was enough things that changed in it that it very much changed the play style of how you had to play the game.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So yes, we've got quite a substantial shift in, as you say, how you play the game, how you build lists, and things like that as well. So, okay, we'll talk about that. Any kind of fond memories from 8th edition that, or kind of the main things that stick in your head? Because you were you were very prevalent. You are prevalent in the 40k scene, the 40k community, and you were at that 8th edition time as well. So, what's some of the main things you can remember about 8th edition?
To be fair, for me, eighth was. I definitely prefer ninth to eighth. To be honest, eighth
Mm-hmm.
still had particularly broken rules going on, and I think, I was an Eldar player at that point, still am, and Eldar are all about speed and maneuverability, and I think eighth really let you exploit that. To be honest,
Mm-hmm.
so me and you had multiple games with your Astra Militarum, and how frequently did your big tanks end up just being
Oh God, yeah, you had to really keep your car park safe. Yeah, if any, and that was
yeah,
the thing. It was just any tiny little model, one of your little troops or anything. Just tag, or I'll just tag multiple tanks if you've not kept them out, spread enough out. And yeah, but that was back when, yeah, if your vehicle's in combat, you did nothing. And that was heartbreaking, soul destroying.
if you had fly, because at that point, if you had fly, you could just fall back out of combat and still shoot as normal. So
Yes, yeah, yeah.
which very again was the sort of the Xenos armies particularly tended to have the higher number of flyers, so they sort of
Mhm.
had that advantage there as opposed to your poor guard or space marine tank, but
Of
touched and dead.
course, of course. Here's me just with an honest man's metal box, just trying to blast at you from distance range. You've got all these flying Xeno shenanigans to get in amongst me. I just used to hate it. It was a nightmare. But still, I mean, lots of fun. The main thing that I remember was there was quite a big partnership. So I'm mainly a Blood Angels player, and I remember Blood Angels and Knights featuring quite nicely in Imperial Soup. That's one of my main memories that I remember from 8th edition. With the loyal, was it loyal 22? You get your guard regiment in there, cool, that's hundreds of CP. Then you get your big knights, and then maybe a smash captain or two from Blood Angels, just suit them in as well, and you've just got like this big killy force. And I used to love that. I thought that was a really, really cool thing. Maybe not nice for other people, but yeah.
You need to take the relics on the loyal 32 as well, so you've also got all the CP regen coming from there.
Yeah.
Them into any army possible. Custodes, Knights, Blood Angels, them guardsmen are needed for everyone.
Correct. And you love to see it. But yes, that was kind of the main things that I remember. But yeah, there was a lot of soup. Soup was definitely on the menu back in 8th. You saw a lot of Chaos Soup, Imperial Soup, maybe not so much Xenos Soup, I wouldn't say.
No, not at that point, to be fair. Most Xenos were quite happily just run monofaction, to be fair.
Yeah, perfect. And then, we then segued into 9th edition, which kind of said, soup's off the menu, folks, and it kind of led you down a path more of staying faction specific. So you pick that faction and you kind of have to go with it, yeah?
And I think they've even, I guess, honed that even more. So, at the beginning, your Drakkar, for example, you may have been running multiple cabals or multiple homunculus detachments, but now it's a case of, no, if you're running it, you are what you need to be. You can't have a mix of dark and light Harlequins to get the best of both. It's, nope, you are one of them, which I think is a good thing to the game, to be fair. It does steer you down a certain path, but it stops some of the more nasty exploits that you can find if you mix them.
Yeah, that's kind of good to see as well. It's a fact that kind of shows that GW is trying to balance it in some way. Yeah, which is good. So in terms of your army building, we saw a change, but then also the missions and also how we kind of play the game. I remember the TTS tournaments of 8th edition where we, it was you had to kill one, kill more, hold one, hold more.
Yeah.
And it's 9th score now is totally turned it on its head. We've now got these, we do still have the primary scoring, the holding of the objectives, but then we've also got the fact that we need to get all these specific secondaries as well. So how did you find that going into it and having to build your list in your army and actually pick these secondaries pre-game?
Well, if you think back to what we were Maelstrom cards, which is random objectives. So at that point, you needed to build an army that could be everywhere, do everything at once. I think with how 9th have gone now, I think sort of definitely the more competitive players, you're building at least 2 secondaries into your list, if not 3. Mm-hmm. They go, and this army will give up XY, and it will do XY. Just like, I'm going to stop as many assassinate points as possible, I'm going to stop as many bring it downs, and I'm going to make it nice and easy for me to do a couple of objectives as well. So you're sort of trying to build it 2 ways. It's to make it easy for you to score and harder for your opponent to score. So they're looking at your list and going, I don't know what secondaries to take against you.
Correct. And yeah, there's a real edge for those armies where you could build a list to tailor to 2 to even all 3 secondaries that are solid, and you think, I could get these every single game, so really after that I just need to worry about the primary game. Yeah. To
be fair, it at least, I guess, with particularly the more recent changes as well, as the secondary games, they're not impossible secondaries, which if you go back to the days of Maelstrom, sometimes it were, if you draw behind enemy lines or something with one of your Maelstrom cards and you're a slow moving army, then you literally can't do anything to score that. You're discarding that card. Well, at least now you're planning in advance, this is what I'm going to be doing with my army and building for that.
Correct. And I think people like just all people prefer, especially in gaming, you prefer to have some modicum of control over the outcome. Whereas, yeah, as you say, with the Maelstrom cards and things like that, are so random that you could just either lose a game or based on some bad cards, or you could, I suppose it could go the other way and you could win a game because you lucked out and got the cards you needed. But yeah, it gives you a way more kind of control and planability, as you say. So yeah, okay. So then, I still can't quite believe that it's only been 2 years.
Been a long 2 years, COVID.
Well, yeah, well, 100%. Yeah, so you're talking July 2020, ninth edition was released. That was like height of the COVID years. So it was kind of released in a time of a lot of uncertainty. And then since then, and only just over 2 years, so this is October, so 2 years and 3 months, we've seen 24 different codices, and that's including the army book supplements as well. So for the likes of your Space Wolves and Blood Angels and things like that, that's a hell of a lot of kind of content to release in a short space of time. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, people talk about whether GW have got a plan or not. I think that they very much do have a plan with how they're doing it. It has been a slow release over the course of time. I think definitely there's been some things that have come out that have been ripe, some things have come out that, they needed fixing. But I think probably one of the more, I guess as a competitive player, one of the things that I'm most happy about with is at least when things come out that are stupidly overpowered or broken or something, GW seem to be responding a lot quicker to try and shut these things down rather than, an entire year of something being truly broken. You might only get 6 months of it.
Exactly, and that's really good to see. And I think you're absolutely spot on. We are seeing more from GW now. I think from their, we've got Warhammer community now, and we've got, I think it just feels like they're more on it in terms of, if they have done something that is overpowered or, as you say, just totally broken, we are seeing it fixed a lot quicker, or certainly them attempting to fix any issues a lot quicker, which is great to see. We will kind of touch upon something later on in the chat tonight about how they have attempted to fix something extremely quickly, on release, essentially, because of they've seen kind of, or a lot of people have been very vocal with how they think it would be overpowered. Something will be overpowered. So yeah, I think it's absolutely right. And in an effort to do that, GW, so we've had 4 chapter approveds since Ninth has released. Now that's kind of updating your kind of GT style mission packs, and they have said it's going to be every 6 months. This is what you're going to be getting. It's going to have the different missions in it. They are changing things like secondaries as well, and it's an effort for them to kind of keep things fresh, but it also can allow them to try and sort any issues as well.
Yeah, 100%. And, it means the scene has to keep on changing. We won't get in a place where we're all just stuck playing the same lists till the end of time. It is a case of, we need to keep responding, keep reacting, particularly as the codexes come out, as the balanced data sheets come in. It just changes how everything plays. I'm not saying Space Marines are in the strongest place at the moment, but if you think of what they were like before Armor of Contempt came in, they'd almost become a bit of a joke. If someone to bring in the Space Marines, it's like fantastic, easy win for me. At least with things like Armor of Contempt, that they may not be the best, but at least now they've gone back to playable again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, you do kind of see that so it's kind of one kind of think of 40k Warhammer as a cyclical. Things will come back around again. You say that quite a lot. I never really see you selling armies or getting rid of stuff, even if it's the worst thing right now, because that it all comes back around again, and then you end up you actually are sitting on stuff that is good.
To be fair, I have an AdMech army. I don't play it a lot. It's not hugely my play style, but, it's going back to a previous edition. I think I've got about 20-odd breaches there. These will not see the light of day until something changes on their rules. But, at some point they will be back up there again.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's always kind of quite fun to just wait for that time and go, oh, I'm sitting on a massive pile of this stuff, and you'll see it. But yeah, so it's quite interesting. So you're a competitive player. You go to pretty much every tournament you can. You are, as I say, you are well known on the 40k competitive scene here in Scotland and also in the UK. From a competitive standpoint, I know that doesn't really phase you in terms of, you need to pick up a new book every 6 months and you need to absorb any FAQs and updates and things like that. But I think there has been a lot of people in the community that are quite vocal if they are maybe more casual players, or they're not people that are going to events and trying to compete for like top spots and podiums and stuff like that. They might feel like a bit of this is a bit of overwhelming, and I have to now buy book. I mean, if you think back to, God, was it going into 8th edition where all codexes got scrapped, and then we had indexes, and everyone was like, oh wow, so all my Xenos rules are in here. I don't have to buy any other books, no campaigns, no supplements, no codexes. And then GW was like, well, but we're going to slowly, we're going to go back to it. We're going to keep giving you all this stuff. So, what are your kind of thoughts on that?
I completely understand the actual complaints that people have in terms of, but this isn't a new thing. Even if you look back to 8th, you could end up to a place state where you go into a tournament and you're carrying 8 books with you. I've got my rules. I've got a subbed in another faction. I've then got my chapter. So you literally still end up with tons of books there. I think 9th has gone some way to streamlining it. I think the biggest problem that you have with a player who's not following everything all the time is trying to keep on track of your own rules. If you're there with your codex, but are perhaps not aware there's been 3 FAQs that have all impacted your army, it can be a really challenging thing, to be fair, because have you done the research? If you've looked at the last chapter approved, that may have showed you your most recent change, but there may have been one in the one before that, particularly for, your older codexes. So I completely get that for a new player trying to get into the hobby, it can be a bit challenging, to be honest. And I think for things like that, actually, Maelstrom as a system does exist still. You still have got your mission cards and stuff like that. So it's actually a nice way just to sort of try and get yourself into the hobby if you sort of just want to get your own army rule set. We talk a lot about match play rules, but ultimately, yes, for tournaments, you have to play match play rules, but if you're playing with friends, you don't have to use those still. It's another set of rules on top of the base, but just while you're getting yourself into a place where you're happy with it, play with what works for you would be the best advice I could give.
Absolutely, no, 100%. I think I certainly wouldn't want anyone to feel pressured into playing the most up to date thing. If you want to do that, then great. I know that I definitely want to do that. I want to try and stay as current as possible to what Games Workshop is putting out, and especially kind of on the tournament scene. But if it's not your bag and you're like, I'm fine. I've got my 9th ed core book and I've got my codex and we're all good there, then that's totally fine as well. But I do kind of recalling back to the whole going to tournaments with just books and books and books. There was a bit of a meme, especially during the Psychic Awakening days of those books, where somebody was wanting to run like a Chaos Soup, and they're like, right, so I need my Chaos Space Marine Codex, I need my Demons Codex because there's a Demon detachment in there as well. I also need this Psychic Awakening book. I need this Psychic Awakening book. I need this. I'm just like, whoa, that's just insane.
It's when that person then is not sure on one of the rules and then spends the next 20 minutes trying to work out which book in that you get the problem. It's like, look, it's fine. Whatever you say the rule is, just go for it. I don't care anymore.
Exactly, but I think you're spot on as well, which is the fact that it's the FAQs. I think Games Workshop do well to update them, and you just go on the Warhammer community website and they're all there for you to download. But it's just knowing to do that, and also knowing that where your stuff is, and there might be a kind of an obscure rule somewhere and a different faction's FAQ that then pertains to your units that you then need to kind of look at as well. So it can be a lot, but I think the more information from Games Workshop, the better to try and deal with any issues, as we say.
When Nephilim and actually included the core rules in there as well, that was a real good play, to be fair, and really useful for them, because that actually gave everyone the core rules in its most up-to-date version back in there again. And yeah, there's going to be more FAQs and more things along the line which will probably change it, but at least everyone's got a decent starting point to go with there.
Correct. I know there was quite a bit of outcry when Nachman came out, and it was like the thinnest book ever, and you had to pay £25 for it. It's like, wait, I've paid £25 for the other chapter proofs. It's got all the core rules in it, and now I'm having to pay this, and it's literally just some secondaries and some missions, and that was it. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I think now the fact that Nephilim has got all that information in there. It's got all of the faction secondaries in there as well now for everyone to see, because I know you've got them kind of in your books, in your codices, but it's got them all in there as well and updated. And yeah, all the missions, all the main secondaries, and yeah, all the kind of core rules or the obscure rules. So no, I think that's definitely something that we could just we can give props to. And then there's just one last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, and that is the balanced data slates. Now, this is something I would say is kind of relatively new from Games Workshop, and I think have we had 2 so far?
Yeah, I think it's either 2 or 3 with another one incoming rapidly.
Yeah, yeah. So should be happening the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah. Should be.
Yeah, and again, just really good for the game. So, and you mentioned Armor Contempt. That's a balanced data slate thing. It's a way to try and make armies that just aren't relevant because they just can't expect to withstand some of the power that's out there, to try and then raise them up and then make them kind of on point, which I really like. I like the raising up thing. Because I know that sometimes cutting things down, nerfing things, can sometimes give some players a bit of a raw deal. But it's kind of like a mixture of both. There's some negative changes to armies where you maybe lose some things, but then some other armies might get buffs, but I think the balanced data slates have been great. What's been your kind of experience with it?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the balanced data sheets. I mean, one of the major complaints that I've had for most of 9th edition was the lookout serve rules and the bodyguard rules, and you had the rules where if you look at the original Death Shroud, for example, you could literally have it out in the open and no one could shoot them because there was a unit of Death Shroud hid behind a wall, and they look at some of the more unpleasant, I won't say abusive, but things that you look at and think this just doesn't feel quite right. And I think, they're using to actually make it a tool to make the game perhaps a little bit better from there. The last one, it was definitely about giving a nudge to some of the armies that needed it. So, you got Armor of Contempt on your Space Marines, your Astra Militarum got the 6s to hit auto wounds. They got the Armor of Contempt on the vehicles. So that they are responding to feedback where people are going, yeah, this isn't quite cutting the cough, because there is such a thing as power creep. The more recent ones are definitely stronger. Look at the original Grey Knights or something like that. You can't even compare that against, a Tyranid book, for example. So the fact that they're willing to use these data sheets to just keep things a little bit more balanced is definitely a thing for me.
Absolutely, and any way for GW to make, as you say, make the game better for everyone, I think is good, because I don't think there's anyone. There might be some people that would be happy if you had one army that was just broken beyond all belief and it was just winning everything for a long period of time, and that's all you saw. Surely even the people that played those armies would get sick of it eventually, and they would want to see some change as well.
To be fair, I spend a lot of time talking to Innes and I play Innes, and he's one of the best Tyranid players around, and even he says he hates Tyranids. It's like, he doesn't have fun playing them, which is a way to show when something perhaps needs that little nudge.
Yeah, well, great. I can't wait for Innes to come on the channel with his nids that he hates.
It's fine. I think he's on Gene Stealer Code to the moment. You're okay.
Perfect. Oh yeah, that's true, and they're fun. I've got some cult, and they're fun, and I think they also saw some kind of quite a bit of change in the last year or two as well. But anyway, we digress. So that's kind of been just a kind of a whistle-stop tour of how we've gotten to the point where we're at now. Now let's go on and talk about current state of affairs, shall we? So we're coming into a brave new world, a Nephilim world. So we've kind of touched on Nephilim a wee bit already in the chat. This is the most recent chapter approved. So this is the kind of gaming supplement that if you are going to competitive tournaments, this is the thing that you need, because the missions that they will play at tournaments will be taken from this book. The secondaries that your army will be picking will be from this book. The new just general rules, like game rules, things like how many CP you get for your games and things like that are in this book. So yeah, huge widespread changes from the last chapter approved Nachmund to this. We've touched upon a couple of those changes. Is there any other big ones that we haven't really kind of spoken about yet, Simon?
I think for me, the main changes for me in Nephilim have been the secondaries, which we've touched briefly on, but Nephilim has changed the secondary world quite significantly, to be fair. There is a case of there's some very clear winners, and unfortunately there are some losers. If you look at armies like Sisters and Necrons, both of those are sat there with incredibly strong secondaries at the moment. There are other armies which definitely fall by the wayside. We've spoken about Tyranids as one of the strongest armies. The secondaries actually aren't amazing, to be perfectly honest, but luckily they just kill everything and move on from there. They changed the number and the type of core secondaries as well. So where before there was 3 or 4, from Battlefield Supremacy, you might have 3 or 4 core ones, plus your own one. Now they've reduced the number of that down. You've no longer got things like kill super heavies with Titan Hunter and kill machines with Bring It Down. They've sort of combined those down just to make the game a little bit more simple, which, makes 100% sense to me. But I think people have definitely played more into the secondary side of things since Nephilim. I think as standard, everyone, particularly at the competitive scene, looks at it and builds an army that can definitely score primary. I think with Nephilim, it's been perhaps more pointed to, right, what can I do to make sure I'm going to maximize my secondary? It's definitely become harder to maximize your secondary. With Nachmund, you might be going, cool, I want 15 points from this. I think with Nephilim, you're more, okay, if I can get a 12 from this, I'll be happy. If I can get a 10 from it, I'll take it.
Yeah. So lots of things to kind of dissect there. Absolutely. So the last thing we touched upon there, just with regards to scoring, you've kind of said that it looks like secondaries are more important in the list building than, say, primary, and that's kind of coupled with the fact that we've lost the number of points that we are able to get with primary as well. Now, was that a Nephilim change, or was that also in Nachmund as well? So getting, say, 4 for 1 hold 1, 8 for hold 2, 12 for hold 3. When did that change?
But what it did is so that's reduced to the 4, 8, 12, but now you've got more specific bonus features, I guess, in each round as well in Nephilim. So, it definitely has made the scoring change, even just from Nachmund, to be fair.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a good point as well. The fact that we've got these bonuses in missions to help bump up the primary that you can get, which is good. And I think so. The really good competitive players shouldn't really be dropping too many primary points. Unless it's like a really tight game, a really close game, and then maybe they're focusing on just like, look, if we can just have a low scoring primary each, but I'll just beat you on my secondaries.
But I think that's one of the major changes. I guess the second one is CP. So we've now gone to, you start with 6 CP and get 1 in your player's turn, 1 in your player's aim, which is a huge change, to be fair. So that changes how your armies are built, how your armies are going to play. I mean, my original Eldar list, I think if we were just starting on 6 CP, I think would now be like just 1 CP. I know I've got a friend who's Death Guard list -3 CP when it starts on just 6. So it's meant to go slightly back to the drawing board and go, right, do I really need 3 different characters with warlord traits? Do I really need 3 different relics? And obviously you also don't get your free warlord trait or free relic anymore. So anything you want now, you're having to pay for.
Correct. And yeah, that was huge. So before, you would see people absolutely just ram their list full of characters, spend those CP strats for give them a warlord trait, give them a warlord trait, give them a relic, give them an additional relic, give them this, give them that. I remember, your Quins list before Nephilim came out, and it was just like Hero Hammer, who's just like Death Jester with this thing, and then I've got the Troop Master with this thing and this thing. But now, yeah, that's kind of it's not maybe gone away completely, because there might be some people that might go, okay, so if I want those goodies, I know that I'm starting on limited CP. But if they're like, well, my game plan doesn't really revolve around lots of strat use and things like that, then maybe I can actually just put all the goodies in. There's some lists that I'm seeing that they're starting on 1 CP or 0 CP for the game. But again, and I know that when people found out that we're going from 12 CP down to 6 starting before they even built their list, people were kind of, oh my god. But we technically are getting more CP through the game.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you get 1 CP start of your turn and 1 CP at the start of your opponent's turn as well.
And fair, I think one of the major things it was to do was to try and reduce the sheer alpha strikes. So you've got lists like Hal, for example, who they could quite happily burn 5-6 CP in one shooting phase, and unfortunately that would destroy a significant chunk of your army. And it's like, right, this is no longer a game now. They've just done that much damage that I can't recover from that. So by changing it to the just 6 CP, and most people will at least have a Warlord and a Relic, so now you're talking you down to 4 CP, it means that you haven't perhaps got that absolutely horrific turn where someone's just going to burn all the CP to destroy your army. Now, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to save up, they're going to have to bide the moment, and it means that gives you time to respond and react, not just taking on the back foot and taking off.
Correct. And it does also mean that if your army has access to CP regen in some fashion, they're looking a lot more kind of tantalising now. I mean, CP regen was always good anyway, but now even more so, So I remember we were kind of chatting and about Space Marines and what you may want to change or what warlord trait you may want to put on, and they've just got a generic one for on a 4-up you get CP, and that could be seen as really good now. Before maybe it's like, oh, not that big a deal because I started with so many CP, but now actually that could be worthwhile.
I think I like the fact that you've still got your huge, great big characters, so your Mortari and your Magnus, and that where you spend that 1 CP for your Warlord trait, but you still get the free CP. Sorry, the free Warlord traits. That to me, I at least like. There was a rumor when it first happened. It's like, oh no, you're paying for each one of the Warlord traits. It's like, I like Mortarion, but I'm not spending free CP just to let him have his abilities.
Well, exactly, and especially when if maybe the fact that you have to bring these guys in, it might even cost you some CP as well, just from the list building thing, and then it's going to cost you even more if you want to give them the Warlord traits. So I know that there were some people freaking out about that, but yeah, that's quite cool. Just kind of it keeps the narrative of kind of the fluff of them being just super powerful. Pay the 1 CP and you get all the good stuff with them, which is nice. The other thing I wanted to touch on as well, so you kind of were speaking about certain armies that saw improved win rates and play with the fact that their secondaries had changes. So you touched on Sisters, their secondary game improved, Necron's secondary game improved, but not only that, but with the changes that would come from something we were previously talking about, the balanced data slate, also giving buffs to these armies, we have seen quite a huge shift. I mean, the one that I have in my mind, and I think a lot of people will be thinking about as well, is Necrons.
Yeah.
Necrons were, I mean, for want of a better word, they were a bit of a joke. They were kind of, you see all these people doing the faction tier lists, and I would hope to maybe get one of those done with yourself as well. Ranking all the different factions and where you think they are competitively. Necrons were in the kind of D tier. For a wee while, we saw that kind of codex creep. They released very early on with Space Marines, and then it slowly but surely, just every single book that came out just seemed to be amazing at killing Space Marines and Necrons, and you just saw their win rates go, oh no 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 no. But now, I mean, I watched a Art of War recently, a very prominent 40k channel, and they have Necrons at S tier. Do you think that that's well warranted?
Yeah, I mean, Necrons have got a lovely combination of things, which at the moment is going well for them. So you've got the fact they can take the custom dynasty for the obsec for their entire army, and the pre-game move. That means
And sorry,
they're
just not to cut you off as well. Sorry, also means things that are already obsec double obsec as well, which is just nuts.
yeah. Combine that with everything has now got core, which is fantastic, and a bunch of secondaries, which it doesn't really require much interaction with your opponent to score. So you can almost ignore your opponent and go, right, let's see how many secondaries I can just score out while I'll obsec them, I'll take objectives, I'll do this, I'll do that. And, I've been playing against Necrons where it's turn 2 and they're already on 20 secondary points. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is a problem.
Wow, bloody hell! And most games you're in, if somebody, say if somebody's getting in their turn, they're maybe scoring 3 for one secretary, 3 for another, and they're like, right, we've started doing this thing. That's pretty good going. But as you say, like turn 2 and they're at 20 already. That's just like whoa. And yeah, so the other thing, God, I kind of there's so many kind of things that coming into my mind as well. So seeing them elevated, in such a way, and as you're saying as well, the fact that it can also work by not interacting with your opponent. That was something that we actually saw quite a big change from going from the last chapter approved to this, because GW basically wanted to, well, from what I'm thinking, is they wanted to remove a lot of non-interaction that was happening with secondaries like to the last, which basically just meant that you could just sit back and not play with your opponent basically, and then end up with a max 15 for a secondary. So yeah, what's your thoughts on that? Now, do you think it's a more interactive game where there is a lot more, you're doing something, your opponent's doing something, you're not just sitting back and waiting to win?
It's a tough one. I think that they have almost done it slightly how you'd almost expect armies to play in some weird way. So if you think about your Blood Angel secondaries, they are very much a A-tier secondary army, I would say. They've got very, very S with very, very strong secondaries, but it is actually going forward and smashing your opponent and getting in their half. So actually, as well as being a very strong set of secondaries, quite fluffy in a weird way, which is strange when you actually talk about competitive 40k, but it's it's the lore type thing. The Necron ones, although nice against them, it almost does like what you expect, that they just stand there, they're going to try and fight you off the middle of the board and just make it a challenge for you to kill them, which a little part of me appeals to the fluffy side of me of going, well, actually, this is what you'd expect Necrons to do. They're just this giant immovable object that you've got to plow through to actually defeat them, which I quite like that, to be fair. It's not the easiest thing to play against, and I'll be honest, certain armies will really struggle against them. But, ultimately, 40k, there is a slight element of rock, paper, scissors. That as much as you try to build these universal lists, there's always going to be certain armies which you're going into go, yeah, this is not going to be a great matchup for you. So that's when you then, it's sort of the player skill there, and obviously the look of the dice as well.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, that rock, paper, scissors kind of metaphor, I think it's just pretty prevalent in any sort of game like this. I mean, I know in Age of Sigmar it's very much the case right now, where you could take a list that is just absolutely rock solid, but then you could have a list that is the paper to your rock, and it just kind of falls apart. You're trying to like dodge them at a tournament. You're like, oh, don't play them because my entire game plan will just crumble. And at the best I'm going to get is a 4-1. And they could stop you from getting up there. But yeah, it's also nice, as you say, it's nice to see the fact that armies feel like they play like they should be playing based on what your army is. Yeah, Blood Angels, they want to come out and smash you, so they've got really good secondaries for that, but then they also will pay for that because their stuff's going to get killed on return as well. You can't just sit back and score stuff with them as well. So yeah, so that's good. So we saw some big changes with that. Yes, we have got a dog on stream. I was hoping we'd
There you go, Smith. Lie down.
I was hoping we'd see Loki on stream. Hi, Loki. Yes.
Guest presenter.
Guest presenter. Yeah, we'll get him on next time for what his thoughts are on Space Wolves. Um, so yeah, so we've chatted about the Nephilim release. We've talked about the big changes that happened. I think we've pretty much touched on the meta response. We've spoken about how people are building to try and secure good secondaries that they can reliably and realistically get every game. And and then kind of from there on, kind of think about the primary and things like that. We've spoken about how people have had to change their list building as well in response to that. And then we have touched very kind of briefly on some winners and some losers. Necrons were mentioned as winners. Sisters were mentioned as winners. Is there any other armies that, as a result of Nephilim or the balanced data slate, we've seen them get turned from like zeros to heroes?
Zeros to heroes, probably not to that extent, to be fair. I mean, you've still got Necrons and Sisters are definitely still top tier. Tyranids still very much, and this is after multiple nerfs into Tyranids. Tyranids are still a very challenging army to play against. Harlequins are a nightmare to play against. They just have so many little tricks that actually they're probably, people use the S and T ranking tier. Harlequins are probably still sat there as a high A type tier. They've definitely took a wee up and down because, you had that brief period of time where the Void Weavers were the best thing in the world. So everyone went out and bought 9 Void Weavers, and then GW went, cool, we're going to smack a 50% points increase on them. And suddenly they became slightly less competitive there.
Yeah, and that's why we have the lovely big red cross next to them.
It's like, but, they're still a very strong army. I don't think there's any other ones that jump out as in instantly got better. I mean, perhaps to be fair, Blood Angels, you could make an argument for. Their secondaries significantly improved, and with access, obviously, to Armor of Contempt from the last balanced data sheets, they're actually a real challenging army to play against now. They're an extreme pressure list where actually, if you can't deal with that, you're going to be in a real significant amount of trouble, to be fair.
Correct. No, absolutely. And I think just any Space Marine factions in general have just seen a boost. The Armor Contempt, I think, has really helped to raise them up. And then not only that, but we also saw some secondary changes, as we say, for Blood Angels. Theirs just changed dramatically, and they can now get a lot of points from secondaries. Things like Salamanders as well, their basic rule of can't reroll to wound against them. That was a change that came in as part of the data slate as well, and obviously it's now part of the Nephilim world also. So yeah, we've seen quite a bit of change for them. What about losers?
I think you've got Genestealer Cult, who I wouldn't class as a loser, but it's definitely more challenging for them. Genestealer Cult were always quite CP hungry, and obviously now we have less CP. They used to buff up their characters quite heavily. They can't go quite the same extent there now. AdMech has fallen off a cliff. Even in the latest GW Community Meta Watch, AdMech are there bringing up the bottom of the list in terms of their overall win percentage. I don't think they're a bad army, but they're an incredibly complicated army to play, and the secondaries are not good. So what you're then left with is an army that you've got to be, it's quite a high skill tier to play it to that competitive level. And even then, you might be on the back foot compared to somebody who can go, cool, just by sitting here, I'm going to get 6 secondary points a turn. Craftworld one, I think, was an interesting one because, I was a Craftworld player. Well, still am, but probably not as my primary now. Their secondaries are okay, I think is probably the best way to describe it, in my opinion. They're definitely not amazing secondaries, but with perhaps other armies feeling like they're getting better secondaries, I think it sort of made Craftworld dip down the trend slightly. Just not that they've significantly got worse, but more everyone else has got that little bit better, just at scoring side of it. So, I took the Eldar across to the WTC, and to be fair, I did okay with it, but I probably went down the wrong route with it, if I'm perfectly honest. So I went down a route of very, very killy Eldar, and I probably should have focused more heavily on better ways of scoring. But case of, yep, if I could see somebody, I could shoot it and kill it, but my secondary game wasn't quite as good, which is one of the reasons why I'm probably more competitively playing Harlequins at the moment, because their secondary game is significantly better.
Got you. And again, that just highlights again it's the importance on secondary game, and that being the difference between winning or losing. And yeah, with points being so tight, I think in the Nephilim world, and you know most people not maxing out their secondaries, and as you say, just being okay with a 10 or in some cases even a 9 or maybe even less than that, depending, because they can then make up the points elsewhere. Yeah, that's been a big one. I think yeah, for me, losers, as soon as you said Gene Stealer Cult, I was like yeah, and I think yeah, it's there kind of in the stats. I remember when they first came out, they were on a bit of a tear. I know we mentioned already. Innes was up in at a tournament up in Aberdeen, I believe it was. Oh no, sorry, or was it? No, Elgin. Sorry, up in Elgin.
Oh.
And yeah, he took that out handily with Gene Stealer Cult on. I think it was in the first kind of week of the release. And I mean, obviously he's an incredibly good player, but it also kind of spoke volumes for their competitiveness as well. And then we saw other people doing well with him at tournaments, and then now I think from what I hear, they are on the up now, but they took quite a bit of a downwards slide. Yeah. And as you say, there was a lot of different aspects that caused that. So, you know, their CP, the fact that, yeah, you couldn't really run or this kind of same lists or do the same game plan you were doing before. And also, I wouldn't say that they have particularly strong secondary game, you know, with their faction-specific secondaries as well.
They've got Brood Swarm, and Brood Swarm is a very strong one. You know, that's literally have more models in certain areas of a board than your opponent, which is a very strong one because they tend to have quite a heavy number of models. But the other ones, once again, it's probably maybe like an Admech situation. I think it's quite, you know, a skilled Gene Stealer Cult player is an absolute nightmare to play against because they know their army in and out, and it's all kinds of little tricks and nasty maneuvers, and you're on the back foot. But I think the level of practice required to get to that level means they're definitely not a beginner's army to pick up with. It's something that you need to really invest the time in.
Yeah, not a very forgiving army, and also comes with it a lot of just kind of logistical barriers to the game as well, because you don't deploy your army, you have to put down blips, and then you then reveal those blips, so that's kind of like a time constraint that's on the player as well. And as you say, yeah, it's quite a shenanigan heavy army where they've got a lot of movement based things, a lot of things that can, you know, come out, kill, go back into reserve, and you have to be very careful. They're made of paper, so they'll just get, like, if you make a mistake or allow somebody to get in, you know, they can just be kind of taken off the board as well. So yeah, it's yeah, for a lot of those lists and factions that can do well under a very skilled pilot, but they also need to be kind of careful. I think that maybe their win rate, as you say, kind of could be get brought down by a kind of a high skill level or high skill floor. And then yeah, so that's pretty much us, do we think? So in terms of we've got some quite strong factions at the top. I think we've actually got quite a nice fat middle. To be honest, I think there's a lot of A and B tier, and you know some kind of C tier factions as well. I think also the fact that we had the new Chaos Demons book come out quite recently, and again they were a bit of a joke kind of list, joke faction. I hardly ever saw them at tournament play. They've now seen quite a big bump as well, so that's nice to see.
Now as well with CSM out as well, and obviously the interaction between the demons and the CSM, there's definitely things that will be coming out of there, I think, that to watch out for in the near future. I think we'll see win rate spiking for those.
Nice. And maybe some soup back on the menu?
Soup will definitely be back on the menu. There's for 500 points of demons, you can add some real unpleasant stuff into a Chaos Space Marine army.
Absolutely, yeah, perfect, and that's great to know, because we've got Chaos Marines on the channel, and they'll be making their debut shortly, and hopefully, yeah, I do hope to add some demons to that as well. So that's great to see. So yeah, so do you think there's anything that we've missed regards to the kind of current state of affairs, or is that I think we've kind of covered most things?
I think we're Probably the only army that maybe deserves an honourable mention is Drakari. So Drakari were the boogeyman for quite some time, to be fair. You know, as someone who plays Drakari, yep, absolutely fine with that. I still think Drakari is probably a very strong army. They're not up with that S tier at the moment. They're still a very fun army to play, to be perfectly honest. And, you know, that game we had just the other night, it definitely shows Drakari still has the teeth. That extreme threat overload that they were, you know, when you had the Kronos and the Talos wandering around with the damage reduction and just the hundreds of grotesques and everything like that, it was a real challenging list to play against. Now, the most competitive way that anybody is seeing them ran is the rack attack. So just the hundreds and hundreds of rack at you.
Sorry, I nearly fell asleep there just as you were saying that list.
Yeah. It's a list we will try out. You know, I think I've got 100 odd racks now, so at some point we'll try it. But I think it's a strange army from a competitive perspective, because on one side it is incredibly hard to play against. On the other side, it's incredibly easy at the competitive level to have time constraint issues. When you're running that many models and trying to do the movement, and you know, you've got armor saves on everything, you've got feel no pains on everything, it actually makes it a real nightmare to actually play that within your allocated time. So personally, I haven't ran Rack Attack yet. This is more sort of from, you know, people I've spoke to. I'm still more a Drakari good stuff type of person, but we will give the racks a run out and just see how long a stream we can make for you.
Yeah, I think we might have to call it after, say, turn 2 and then just talk it out. But yeah, it's funny that you mention that, because we have had a wee bit of timing out controversy happening recently. So it's definitely something important to note. That yeah, it's definitely a factor to have in, that you could take a list that's 200 racks, but you have to play it within the time that you get given. You know, a lot of these top tables, they're chess clocked. You have an hour and a half each, and that's it. So yeah, you have to take that into account as well. But no, be interested to see. And yeah, I really like Drakari. I think they've always been good, and yeah, I think they maybe saw a wee bit of a dip, but I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be anything other than in probably A tier. They're still a trader's dream. You know, their stuff is so cheap for what it does. You know, you've got 5 incubi that can just go out and basically whomp most things in the game for, like, what are they again, Simon? Tell me the points.
95, something like that.
95 points. Yeah, just 95 points. They could just kill a unit, either double or triple what their points value is. And they're also just so fast, as you say, threat overload. They've can have decent secondaries as well, but also play the primary and trading game as well exceptionally well. So yeah, no, that's a really good mention. I like that. Cool. So that's the kind of current state of affairs. We've tried to cover that in also as much detail, but also keep it as kind of, you know, time brief as well. We could probably chat about 40k for hours and hours and hours, but yeah, we want to try and keep these segments quite kind of short and sweet. So let's end that there, and then we're going to finish off. So with our last bit of time with yourselves, we're going to make some potentially bold predictions for the future, maybe. And yeah, just kind of have a wee look at what's coming up and how we think that might change the landscape. And yeah, maybe some big changes we might see in the aforementioned balanced kind of data slate as well. So we've got the wee kind of picture up there. Now, Votann has just came out, and as I've said, they're nerfed on release. So let's try and be brief, but I know that kind of a lot went on, but do we think that was warranted, and do we think that was the change that we needed to see to that faction?
I think it's fair. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't know. I think one of the interesting things that's changed, particularly sort of in the post-COVID environment, is that people actually play an awful lot on TTS these days. So, you know, where before, if an army's being released, you sort of wait till it's been released and then start playing to a certain extent. Now you will literally get people having dozens of games on TTS or something similar before an army's even out to actually test the rules. The rules on Rotan, where they were basically just destroying everything with shooting, to be fair. The auto wounding as if it would roll a 6 on, on 6s, on 5s, on 4s. It just felt a little bit overpowering. It's cutting out a whole step of the game. You're not needing to roll to wound. If we think about, I guess, briefly touch Eldar Hail of Doom, they have that, and people hate them for it. But this is against guns that also potentially ignore invulns. It's guns that splash mortal wound damage through people. And yeah, so yes, I think it's right for that those rules were changed. The points increases, I think it's a little bit harder to judge yet, because I think we do need to see a little bit more of how they actually play on the board. Their secondaries are solid, but they're not amazing. They're not Necron Sisters level. And ultimately, these guys are, 5-inch move. They're not going to be sprinting across the board to get to you. I think the faster your army is, the easier time you'll have a playing against them. But ultimately, I think if you put yourself in front of them, they will shoot and kill you. Particularly with the rules as they were. With how they are now, I think they're at least in a fair place to try it out with a bit more in depth. Let's take them to a few tournaments. Let's see what the results are looking like. That's the good thing about how GW is responding at the moment. If it turns out that actually, they've suddenly got a 79% win rate, then I will guarantee something will get changed on them again.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I think really, really good summary there, Simon. And yeah, so to touch up on your point on TTS, so for those of you who don't know, so Tabletop Simulator is a really nifty bit of software that you can get on Steam, and it is totally free. And then there's modders that have modded the way that you can play games of Warhammer in there as well. You can, there's people that have made little 3D models, so you can get all your models, your full army, and it's a really good way, I think, it's a great testing ground. As you say, back when we couldn't really factor in, well, how good is this army on the table? Because you would have to buy the whole army, you would then have to, or unless you proxied it in some way, but you'd have to buy the entire army, get it on the table, and then get reps in against other people, which takes a long time. You need to meet up with other people, social lives and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, you can just meet online, a couple of hours, TTS, bash it a couple of turns, and then get a feel for the army, re-rack, rep again, and then you can be like, wow, yeah. So I think that's a really good thing, to a really good resource to have, certainly, as you say, and it's allowed us to have a quicker look at what we think an army is like, the kind of strength and power levels. And yeah, it was looking as if, when they're just their normal base troops, infantry, were just pointing and clicking and removing things off the board with ease. And yeah, it was almost like Tau 2.0, Tau but stronger, where, if you can see them, you're just removing it. So yeah, I think the changes, is good to see. The fact that, yeah, when you roll those grudge, for the grudge tokens, the 6s to wound, they don't then count as if it was a 6, kind of a la Hail of Doom, as you kind of had it. And also, yeah, the points increases, as you say, we're going to have to see what it's like at tournaments. It's still very early doors. They only just kind of came out, and also their full range hasn't even been released. People are only kind of working with the stuff that was in the starter box, or the kind of, the box that came out with all the kind of, your entry level stuff. So yeah, that'll be very interesting to see, and then also to see if it was a big enough change as well. But yeah, I think we'll see what shakes out. And then in terms of what's coming up next, we are going to be seeing Astra Militarum.
Yep.
As our next Codex release, and then after that, World Eaters, which is really nice to see. So we're seeing a bit of love for the kind of the main legions of the Chaos Space Marines. So we've already had a Death Guard book. We have a Thousand Suns book. One assigned to each of the gods. Nurgle and Tzeentch, respectfully. And then now we're going to have our our Khorne, our Angry Marines, and World Eaters, which is good. And then also, yeah, Astra Militarum, who have really been needing a book, I think. Yeah, they're still working off of quite an old book.
Yeah.
I think so. They're in need of some love, and we saw quite a bit of that in the previews that we had this weekend. We saw a few new units, a few heavy weapons teams, but obviously still a lot more to come. What's your thoughts on those releases? What do we think might happen with them?
I think I actually, it's weird to say, but the guard, I'm not sure what they're going to do with. The World Eaters, I think anybody who sort of follows how Chaos Space Marines play at the moment, you've also got the sort of the I guess, version 1 World Eater rules that they did in the White Dwarf. So we know how World Eaters are going to go to a certain extent. Guard, I really don't know what they're going to do with it, to be perfectly honest, because it needs to be something fairly significant to make them valid again. It's one of the most iconic armies. It's one that people love to play against, but that's at the moment because you get quite easily. But they're a really cool army. It's just, what's the biggest issue? They hit on 4s almost army wide, and they're incredibly, easy to kill. So you go, well, okay, so should they be taking that away from them? Should they be making them hit better? But if you do, then they're hitting the same as Space Marines, which that also feels wrong as well. So I don't actually know how they're going to go about doing it. I'm guessing more in the line of special ability type things. So, maybe calling in artillery strikes as stratagems. And I really think it needs to be almost a complete overhaul. But if you sort of gone to my head and said, how do you make guard work? I actually can't give an answer that I'm happy with. So I'm really intrigued to see what GW is actually going to do with that, to be fair, because if you go too heavy down the tank line, well, they've already given tanks 6s to hit auto wound, as well as giving them armor of contempt, as well as pushing them to 2-up armor. T8 on a Lehman Russ. That's actually an incredible amount of defense and offense, to be fair. So what else do they need? What does it actually take for guard to actually become competitive again? Maybe do they go down the lines of, going back to hordes and having literally huge units, or I don't know. I think that's the one I'm most intrigued to see what EW do with.
Yeah, great points there, and yeah, I'm kind of racking my brain thinking of what do they do to make them relevant, and also something that's maybe it's not just been done before. They're just going to make the guns better, so they just get killier. We've already had a kind of our flirtations with out of line of sight shooting, and that took a big change with the balanced state slate, and we just don't see it anymore. Now they've got artillery and things that are designed to shoot out of line of sight. Now I know that they kind of circumvent some of those rules as part of the balanced data slate as well, but are we going to see maybe a buff to them? Because that is something that's quite iconic for Guard. They are a very kind of old school, almost First World War type of battle style, where they just maybe sit back and blast you with guns and then just send wave after wave of infantry at you. How did they make the lasguns? Could they make the lasguns good? They've almost kind of been a bit of a joke for years, unless you got some hellish combination where from one big blob you're getting like 100 to 200 shots from it. And it's like, right, okay, so that again it gets a bit silly. And yeah, tanks, I was a long time guard player and love my Lehman Russes, like can't get enough of them. I think the changes to vehicles in this edition are good, and the fact that if you tag it, it's not totally useless, it can still fire into combat. But with a lot of their main turrets being blast, which you then can't do that in combat, I don't know, maybe do they make them ignore that rule?
That could be an interesting one for them, to be fair. I know there was something, I don't know if it's even 748th edition, about where I think Guard actually had it previously, where units could actually increase their actual units. 2 units could join together, which actually could be interesting to make sort of horde-sized units. Go back to doing maybe full-on vehicle squadrons, because that's not something that really exists anymore. 3 Lehman Russes in a squadron, if they're all within a certain distance of each other, they get bonuses or benefits, or obviously they will do something with orders, so it's what they do with that to their. I think that the problem that you've got with ignore line of sight shooting, though, is that risk of of improving it too much. So if you think about a standard 40k Nephilim mission now, you've generally got one objective somewhere on the board, maybe two, that you can hold with a unit, and actually that unit is fairly safe there. If we're going to say that Guard turns this incredible ignore line of sight shooting army, then you're actually going to continuously struggle to hold your backfield objectives against them. It'll just be that, cool, every turn they shoot me off my home objective because I can't hold it and I can't hide from them, and they've got 72-inch range and hundreds of shots. So I don't know. The lasgun, oddly, I wouldn't be surprised if the lasgun does improve. I think, if anything, they'll give it -1 AP, which will be great against things like Xenos, but once again, Arm of Contempt then comes in on your Space Marines, and it's as good as giving them nothing. But at least, you don't always play Space Marines or Sisters or Chaos Space Marines, so that is an increasingly large chunk.
To be fair, talking about, you've touched upon the fact that armies kind of feel like they play how they actually should feel like they are in the universe. Lasgun shouldn't do anything against power armor. It should just plink off it. So that kind of works. But I'm sure like mass light firepower could, shred some orcs. Some lightly armored Xenos, some Nids perhaps, things like that. So yeah, I think maybe giving them that wee pip of AP, I think could be all the difference, especially with the fact that we can get massed volumes of fire through. If you're saying we could potentially combine squads, that would be a way to get mass lasgun fire. The fact that you've got, we do have orders for first rank fire, second rank fire to get more shots as well. That could be good. I think for me, I've read so many Guard novels and things like that, and have absorbed a lot of the lore, and I love it. It's just great because it's just so nice to have just like standard human grunts facing off against some of the most horrible horrors of the universe, and they just kind of stand firm. And Cadia, the planet broke before the Guard did, and all that jazz. They're just like brave, and they just stand firm, and they just blast away and just kind of outgrind you, and they kind of play as a combined arms list. You've got the infantry are supported by the tanks. The tanks help to kill stuff for the infantry, and the infantry help to protect the tanks. And I'm wondering, so that there is already that kind of gameplay in game because you screen the tanks, but I do also wonder, is there maybe some way we could have some sort of bonus to either of those squads if you are actually setting them up next to each other, like if they're within range of each other, if you then get some sort of mechanism or synergy.
Maybe some kind of for increasing strength or increasing AP or increasing something if you're the second unit that shoots at an enemy target or something like that, sort of like I think was it Orc freebooters, I think when they originally came out, it's like for each unit that they kill, they get +1 to hit. Maybe they could do something similar with Guard for each consecutive Guard unit that shoots at the same target, you get something, whether it's ignore, first unit ignore cover, next one extra AP, next one extra strength, so on and so forth.
That might be cool. Yeah, or maybe like suppression fire. We used to have that back in the old editions. You shot a unit with something that could actually then suppress them. Maybe they had to take cover, or they got minus to hit and stuff like that when they then came to shoot because they were kind of shell shocked and stuff like that. So that'd be kind of some cool stuff. And then we've already kind of seen potentially how the world eaters are going to be playing, because we've got the White Dwarf rules there. There's some people that have been taking them and using them, and I wonder if it is. I mean, it probably won't be a complete just copy and paste, but very similar. We know that their main backbone is going to be things like Khorne Berserkers. We've seen the guy riding the big Juggernaut as part of their preview as well. They along with the Chaos Space Marines might be able to then summon in maybe some Khorne Demons, which would be nice because I think Khorne Demons are quite good as part of the Chaos Demons book as well. And yeah, they're probably just...
Don't forget, we'll also have a new Primarch.
Ah, yes, big Angron himself, Demon Primarch also, which would be really interesting to see. You've got to love seeing more Primarchs coming out, and you know, you remember when Morty came out and when Magnus came out and all that kind of stuff, and it was like, oh wow, this is like a big centerpiece, and you love to see it. So yeah, that'll be really interesting. So let's talk about the Nerf hammer. As we said, the next balanced data slate will be coming up shortly. Who do we think is going to be getting hit with that?
If we're going by what GW themselves have said, they want everyone at about a 50% win rate. You know, the two people, well, two most above that at the moment are Tyranids and Harlequins. Tyranids, yeah, Tyranids are just an interesting army because although they're sort of like the opposite of everything we've spoken about here, so their secondaries aren't oh my god, it's an auto win secondary. But what it is you've got a bunch of incredibly strong data sheets, some decent points costs, and a set of rules which overall are really strong. So I think Nids are still on the chopping block. Harlequins, and I say this as a Harlequin player, I just wish they'd change Harlequins slightly at the moment. My current Harlequin list is a shooting list, which as Harlequins just feels 100% wrong to me. It works, it gets the job done, it's a pain to play against, but at the same time it feels incredibly wrong to me that my Harlequins aren't running into combat and chopping people up. So I'm hoping that there's some kind of nerf / balance in that. It's like, you know, with Armor of Contempt, Harlequins are perhaps not the combat monsters which you'd want them to be. I mean, Harlequins hit on 3s in combat. Can't really get any rerolls to hit. They're, for normal troops guys, they're strength 4 if you've got a special weapon. So, you know, the amount of time that you just bounce across Space Marines, it's actually a little bit depressing, to be fair. So I'm hoping they do something to make Harlequins go a little bit more close combat and take away the let's spam boats, fusion, and Euro pistols, because it works, but it's not the most entertaining way to play. You know, it's an Innis type situation. I'll quite happily play that list because it's very competitive, but it's not like you tend to have much fun playing.
Yeah, and a lot of the competitive lists sadly end up like that. You know, you find you find the best combo, you spam it, that's it, and you just go with that. So no, yeah, interesting thoughts. So that's who we think might be getting touched by the Nerf hammer. Any thoughts on who might receive some boosts from the balance dates? Like maybe who's struggling just now, and a few little maybe tweaks or points changes, or maybe even just kind of rules changes might elevate them slightly.
AdMech definitely need help, and to be fair, GW even said AdMech need help. So maybe do we see breaches going back to core? Because at the moment they're not. They're this weird non-infantry biker units, which it just means they can't do a bunch of actions, and they just don't seem to fit in with the rest of the AdMech army. So maybe we even just a wee little thing to bring maybe the good old space robots and the breaches back into core would go some way to making AdMech perhaps more variable. Space Marines, Space Marines still need something again, to be fair, because the general trend for them is still significantly lower than everyone else in terms of percentage. But what you do with Marines, I don't know with that one, if I'm honest. You look at them and go, well, we've already given them Armor of Contempt, we've given them Doctrines, we've given them 2 wounds. Fine. It's like, what else do we actually do? The secondaries are not bad. So it's another one where I'd be interested to see what they do, because I think something needs to happen, because, the Space Marines are the poster child for GW. Admittedly, you have got that sort of balance where it tends to be a lot of people's first army, which sort of can really skew their actual win percentages. But you don't tend to see many people tearing up the top tables with Space Marines. You might see occasional Blood Angels, you might see the odd Iron Hands, but other than that, that tends to be about it. So there still needs to be something there.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. I think for me, as a Space Marines player, I think they have gotten better, and I think that yeah, that you can get some strong builds. But I'm also just very aware of the fact that there's so much out there that is just good at killing Marines. Just in terms of that profile. So if it's a profile that is strength, even stuff that's strength 4, but strength 4 higher. I mean, five's the kind of 5+ is the kind of sweet spot. Because then you're wounding on 3s. But anything that's like that with decent AP, because I know that obviously Armour of Contempt is reducing AP, but still, even if you can get something to AP2, then you're still failing saves. Power armor saves on a 50% chance, and damage 2. There's so many like just profiles I feel in the game that are that. That is that damage 2 that's the killer, and there's units out there that are half the cost of a Space Marine unit that have a profile like that can wipe out a Space Marine unit, and you then trade back, but it's a terrible trade because you've had to trade with something that's double the cost of this other unit that then and just do that. That's my feeling, in particular, as to why they maybe struggle so much, is that their points efficiency on the table isn't great.
It's weird though because this, we say that, but they still tend to get a lot more. They're a lot more synergistic than most armies. So you look at, you've got your captain, you've got your lieutenant, you've got your chaplain, you've got your apothecary. You've got an awful lot to increase the overall power of the force. If you compare that to, say, Harlequins, for example, I can get a troop master who gives me reroll 1s to wound. That's it. If you look at Eldar, Autarch can give me reroll 1s to hit. Drakari, Archon, reroll 1s to hit. Necrons, couple of +1s to hit. Space Marines have still got the synergistic side of it so much better than everyone else, but that almost seems to penalise them sometimes because that almost encourages them to clump closer together or, create the old-fashioned death balls where everyone's just going to walk forward and they're a pain to kill. But at that point, how well are they playing the primary or the secondary mission?
Exactly. So you then just you've got armies that are way more maneuverable than them just can ignore those death balls and go and score more anyway. Don't even need to interact with this massive killy thing that doesn't die in the middle of the board because why would you? So I think my kind of clap back to that. I think you're absolutely right. They are more synergistic. You're designing lists where it's like that unit gets the chapter master rerolls. They're then going to get reroll 1s to wound with this thing. They're then going to follow around this selfless healer apothecary that's going to res guys back, give them a 6-up shrug, and that costs CPs to do that. So all these warlord traits and things like that as well, you need to always make sure you've got those CP for the transhumans, for if you want the 6s to hit auto wound and things like that. But then also I would say that their synergy's better, but I just feel like their raw data sheets are outclassed by quite a lot of the field as well. So I feel like there's a kind of there's a trade-off there where they need those synergies to make things good, because on a one-on-one, if it's just this data sheet versus this data sheet, they often can just lose that transaction.
I don't know, let's play a quick theory hammer. If you were to improve the data sheet, what would you give them? It's like, okay, so look at a standard, intercessor or assault, so movement 6 is probably fine. You probably wouldn't want to give them ballistic skill 2 or weapon skill 2 because that you almost feel that should be for their elite. That should be for the paladin Grey Knights or something like that. So then you go, okay, so do we really think they should be strength 5? Well, actually, I wouldn't rule that out, but I also don't think it'd actually bring much benefit to them. I don't think it'd hugely impact the win rate. T5, I think it's probably a step too far. I know orcs have got it, but that's to balance the fact orcs don't have any armor. Mm-hmm. So now, okay, well, should they be 3 wounds? And I don't know. There's nothing there that, from just a data sheet perspective, that actually, to me, is a weak data sheet. Something I did think would be an interesting gimmick for them. And, do we go down the line of, they're the highly trained military force? Do we maybe get them having more CP? And perhaps what you could do, which could be interesting, and the sort of precedents have been set on this, what about let them use the same strat twice a turn? So if and twice, if you could interrupt twice, if that could give them something a little bit different, which no one else has really got yet. Obviously, you've got to choose how you spend your CP still, but it may just give you that little bit of an edge that sometimes you need. So, how often have I played against, you even, and you've put transhuman on one unit, but you know for a fact that the second you do that, I'm going to switch all my firepower onto a different unit, and okay, you've protected one, but it's almost baited out. If maybe you had the option to do every stratagem twice, or even select stratagems twice, that could be interesting.
Yeah, that's quite cool. I like that going down the lines of they are martial prowess. They're they're supposed to be the most superior, the things that humanity's got access to. So yeah, I like that. That would be a cool change for them potentially. Anybody else that we can think of that might see some drastic changes, or is that kind of it? Do we think?
I don't think you'll get any other drastic ones in the sort of immediate future. To be fair, orcs not in an ideal place, but once again, I'm not quite sure what we'd actually want to do with orcs to improve those guys. They have got the WoW with the 2-turn benefit now, which actually made a huge change from them. But at the same time, they got nerfed when they couldn't run all the buggies in the world, which thank God, because that was hideous to play against. So orcs are probably another one that's on the spectrum for maybe something for them. Personally, I think orcs would be interesting if they actually moved a bit faster. I think them more board presence. Let's get these guys swarming at you even faster. Maybe give them an increase to their advance as well. So maybe movement 7 with +1 to their advance or something like that. Just so it really tacks into that. From the fluff side, it tacks into the feel of them coming at you, but from the competitive side of it's that threat overload, it's that board control. What can they do from there?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I was thinking orcs in my head because it was like one of these ones where they came out and I think they saw some success, and then I've just not really kind of seen much kind of happening with them recently. They got I think they picked up a couple of nerfs. And well, as you say, with the buggies and things like that, which was just one people were leaning very heavily into that. But I still think they've got some chops. Excuse me, and yeah, it'd be nice to see them maybe get a bit of love as well, because I think most of the things that I'm hearing about them or seeing about them is maybe kind of C tier, maybe kind of flirting with bottom B. So yeah, that'd be nice for them to get some B buffs as well. Just to kind of check in live chat, we've got Liam T, and he has suggested this is for Space Marines for a change. He's saying make their super doctrines always turned on. They aren't the problem that they were in 8th. So what's your thoughts on that?
To be fair, that's actually not a bad shout. To be fair, it leans into what we're talking about in terms of we don't want people suping, we want people focusing on to that one army. I wouldn't have an issue with that, to be perfectly honest. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have an issue with that and a couple of other little tweaks to increase them up. It's definitely not going to break the game for them. I think the only downside about that, I mean, when they first came out, it was very much, which was a problem one, was it Iron Hands, where everyone was just staying in the Devastator Doctrine or pushing back into the Devastator Doctrine to get all the benefits all the time. I think the only issue would be that is if anyone's Super Doctrine is technically too strong. But, if you look at your Blood Angels list, would it hugely impact you if you had +1 attack all the time rather than just turn 3? I don't really think so.
Not really. I was able to put things into super. I was able to put them things on turn 1 and 2 with a Sanguinary Priest anyway. So yeah.
But, and particularly if you think about it from if we're talking about people whose Super Doctrine is in the later turns anyway, like Space Wolves or stuff like that. Generally, they don't even benefit. Well, they won't benefit from it turn 1 anyway, because they won't be able to actually get into combat. So yeah, I would have no issue with that kicking in pretty much full time.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And again, it kind of just ties into that lore, that fluff that they are, the best of the best, and can do that. Yeah, fantastic. Just one other comment as well. We've got David Lyle, who's commented in. That was we played a game this week, Chaos Knights versus Death Guard, and he is currently building up some warp talons just now. So first of all, well done, good job. I think warp talons are a fantastic unit. I'd be interested to know what flavour of warp talons they're going to be. So mine that we'll be seeing on the channel shortly will be in word bearers, because I think they're amazing in word bearers, because they can then reroll all hits and all wounds when they charge in, which is great. But I'm seeing for Chaos quite a bit of love for creations of bile. And now, do we think that is going to be getting some changes with the new data slate?
But it's weird. I would expect them to get changes. I just don't know if it'll be this one. If we look at Harlequins, so the Dark Sadif had exactly the same ability. It was Fight on Death, and that was moved quite sharpish and removed from the game. I would be surprised if they kept the creation of bile as it is, because that's +1 movement, +1 strength, and Fight on Death means it's literally a trading nightmare. You combat. And for armies like your Blood Angels, like your Sisters, where the whole concept is the unit runs in, it deletes your unit that's on an objective, it then dies the next turn. If it's dying that same turn it runs in, then that creates a real issue for certain armies. So I would expect that to disappear, or at least maybe get changed. So maybe it's a case of it only happens on a 4-up, or I hope they don't go down the same route as the Dark Harlequins, because Dark Harlequins is now you can potentially bounce a mortal wound back when you die, which, not gonna lie, it's quite underwhelming. It's like, yay, I may do 5 mortal wounds back to you. Realistically, I'm more likely to do 2, which, you've deleted my squad, I've killed 1 Space Marine back. It's not really a threat, to be fair. So, I would like to say Creations of Bile will lose it. I think if that's the precedent, then yeah, I can't see it staying. But maybe stay as some kind of weakened version where, even on a 5-up, they get to fight again. That's going to happen 1/3 of the time. It's not going to break the game, but at the same time, it means you can't count on it.
No, 100%, yeah, which is good. And funnily enough, he is building for Bile, or he's also said, or Black. He might pivot to Black Legion if they do cop a nerf. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there who they're maybe thinking of one thing that they're looking to try and build now, but also within the knowledge of that might see change. So let's look at pivot options. And the good thing about that is, if it does go Black Legion, I think that they are still a very strong sub-faction. The fact that they've got access to, I think, the best version of Abaddon, because you can heal him in Black Legion. He's also putting out the better buffs in Black Legion as well. You've also got access to the relic that gives out OBSEC in Black Legion. So yeah, a really nice, strong pivot option there as well.
Speaking of nerfs, though, I would expect Abaddon to take one.
Oh, so what we think? Losing the damage phase caps, or?
I think you'll more likely get a points increase, which therefore means it probably won't happen in balanced data shape. It'll be somewhere else. I would expect. He's almost just a little bit too much of an auto take at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think actually one of the events up in Elgin, Gavin Heritage, I think, won that one. So he ran, I think he was running Baby Armigers with Abaddon. And it was, it's just, Abaddon just feels like he's got a little bit too much positive stuff going for him at the moment. So I think, will it be a case of he'll just give reroll ones just to CSM rather than Chaos? That probably wouldn't be the worst shout in the world, to be honest. Definitely a wee points increase. Maybe make it so he can't be healed would probably be a fair shout, to be fair. But yeah, that's what I'd hope to see.
Yeah, I think phase capping and access to healing, I think is amazing. That's just, and it could be seen as quite broken. And yeah, I think a points increase. I don't think that would be particularly a surprise to most people. He's only 300 points in this little package and you get a lot for him. But yeah, if he does see an increase, that might then mean that those lists, such as their Knights plus Armigers spam, Abaddon plus Armiger spam, or War Dog spam rather, might not be as points efficient. Or if they're going to maybe try and make it that he can't be souped as easily into things, perhaps as well. So I think there's some definite options there. So in terms of the kind of maybe what we think the proposed changes, I think we've covered that quite well. We've gone into quite a bit of detail there. For our last little bit, and this is probably just going to be a very quick thing, is there any thoughts on what the next chapter approved might bring? So we're talking, this will be in January, or kind of around about that time, kind of into the new year, because it's every 6 months, correct?
I'm not sure it's even almost worthwhile hazarding a guess at the moment, to be fair. There is rumours that 10th edition is incoming.
Ooh, yeah.
So, the rumours I did hear with 10th edition was July next year. So I'm not sure there'll be anything hugely game changing, because I think balanced data shape will come in the immediate future. So I'm not. If they are looking at a new edition later on next year, I'm not sure they'll try and change everything again, or maybe they'll go completely opposite way and just start shuffling us more towards 10th edition rules already. Do they already know where we're going, and each balanced data sheet or each chapter approved is just taking us that one step closer to what we're after? Are we going to end up more? And you could argue that the command points has almost gone more Sigmar-esque in the way that how it is in this edition now, with the whole, you're getting stuff in your turn and your opponent, and the smaller amount is both very Sigmar type style. So maybe it's a case of they've already got a plan what they want for 10th, and this is all just ep changes heading that way.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense for them to do that. They kind of slowly drip feed it out, and maybe the more later codices that we see before, if we're getting the next edition next year, will kind of point towards that as well, or certainly the next kind of chapter approves as well. I think the only thing that I can think of that we would see change, because it's something that we have seen change before, is changes to the secondary options going into. So is there any secondaries that you think are troublesome right now that need changed?
I think the shadow operation ones in general are interesting, because particularly things like banners, they're all, for certain armies, they're almost an auto take, and it's particularly a competitive scene where if you have managed to, you can literally focus on smashing your opponent's turn 1, 2, 3, and then turns 4 and 5 get your banners up. And because you score them in turns 4, 5, and end of game, you can literally just get one banner up before then and still actually max by the end of the game if you've managed. It's almost like a win more secondary at some point. And don't get me wrong, if you're playing against an army that's fast or maneuverable or something like that, then it's a challenging one. But if you're playing against a more slow army, it's almost guaranteed that you're actually going to get decent points from it, to be fair. R&D also, once again, has it become an auto take when you don't have a Beckett secondary? Because realistically, you're going to get 8 points from R&D unless something goes drastically wrong. Unless we're in this world where we're frantically pushing for every point, and if we're saying secondaries are more challenging now, 8 not horrific, to be fair. So I think probably they could have a look at those and maybe make them a little bit more difficult. I think Engage has gone from a comfortable auto take to something that is now not great. The whole, you've got to be 6 inches into each table quarter, I think is maybe a little bit overkill. I'd probably settle for something like a 3 inches into the display just to get yourself in there properly, rather than just, that nudging in.
Yeah.
But I think the 6 inches in can make it a little bit challenging at times now. So I think if Engage used to be an auto take when secondaries first came out. It's now gone to almost well, if you really haven't got anything else and you haven't got any factory secondaries, then yeah, okay, at that point maybe shove Engage in there, which I think it's a good objective in terms of how GW want the game to play. They want it to be this fast movement. They want people all over the place. So it's like, well, in that case, give us some points to incentivize us for doing that.
Yeah, you're right. I can't remember the last time I played against someone and Engage was taken. I really can't. So yeah, no, that's a really good shout. Yep. We've had a call out from Liam T again. He's saying change all of the Necron ones. And he's saying that as a Necron player as well, so that's very, very big of him. It takes a big person to admit that there's a problem, especially if it's a problem with your own army. But yeah, as you say, those secondaries, if you're getting crazy scores and you're just maxing them out every single game and also not interacting with your opponent, that's got to see a change, right?
Yeah, I'd expect to see the Necrons take a hit in the foreseeable future, but it's also a weird one because at the same time, although Necrons have a lot of incredibly strong advantages, which is they've got strong secondaries and they are universal obsec and everything like that, they're still not the most resilient army. So what I tend to find, the way to go against Necrons is almost an all-out offensive on them, except the fact that they're going to hammer you on secondaries turn 1 and turn 2, except the fact they're probably going to hammer you on primaries turn 2. But you can kill them, and if you kill them fast enough, then at that point, the Necron player starts struggling on the primary game. So what you'll tend to is they'll score secondary incredibly well, but the primary game can tend to out. So as much as I'd love to jump on the nerf Necron secondaries, I don't think a huge nerf is required. Maybe just slightly drop the points that they're getting for these secondaries, make it so they can't max it in just 3 turns, make it so it's 2 or 3 points a turn rather than 4 or 5 points a turn. But I still don't think they need to be burnt at the stake as a witch yet. I think they're not horrific. I would be much happier to see the obsec side of them take a nerf rather than the secondary side of them, because I think the obsec is what sort of feeds the secondary side of it as well, because it's so easy to take objectives. If we maybe limited that at that point, I think that's maybe a better way to go to attack Necrons.
Yeah, and it's very telling if you just see the same lists or the same thing taken every single time. There's not really a lot of list variety with Necrons. It's pretty much always obsec on everything, double obsec on things that are already obsec, and the pre-game move. I think that we see a lot. There's pretty much no real incentive to take the named sub-factions, like Nihilak and Mithrit and all that stuff. Like, there's just why would I not just take this thing that just means I just score all the time, and it's really difficult to ship me off of objectives because I'm dot obsec or double obsec, so yeah, that'd be a good shout as well. And I think it also shows quite a good bit of restraint from yourself, Simon, that you're just well, they're not the maybe as much of a boogeyman as they are, because you're right, they can just be killed. If you've got an army that is good into them and can just kill them, maybe table them within a couple of turns, then they can't score all these massive points, right?
I'll settle for 3 or 4, but if you can just take in the primary side of things, that's how I had most success against them.
Yeah, no, ideal, perfect. So yeah, I think that takes us up to the end of our show tonight. So we've talked about a lot of current state of affairs with 9th edition. I think we've touched on a lot of good points. We've spoken a lot about maybe things that need to see change, or we might see change as well, and we've noted quite a lot of specific factions as well. So I think we've done pretty well. Anything else you'd like to add in, Simon, before we get finished up?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much fun to touch on.
Perfect. No, fantastic. And yeah, so the plan for this episode was to just give a good kind of base layer to work off of. This is our first 40k focused battle cry, so it's good to just, I think, just to have a good base layer, you know, so people know exactly what we're kind of talking about. I think if I was to just go straight into, you know, like a codex review or something like that without actually kind of touching upon, well, what's the actual 40k metaverse looking like right now, I think it would be, yeah, not great. So that was the plan for today. I think we've achieved that, so that's good. So, but let us know what you think, folks. Give me your thoughts. Please comment below as well, and let us know what you think. Did we miss any massive game things? Are there anything else that you would like us to touch upon in the future? And yeah, if we've got anything else you'd like to add, then please let us know. And yeah, thank you for watching. We'll just go into my nice thanks screen. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and again, also if you're so inclined and would like to support the channel, please visit the Patreon as well. I'd like to say a big huge thanks to the sponsors of the channel, tabletopminis.co.uk. I'd like to give a thanks to our patrons as well, so they're up on the screen to see as well. And I'd also like to give one big final thanks to my guest host Simon. Thank you very much for joining us on this. You've just flown back into the country, and I've immediately put you live onto the internet, so thanks for putting up with me for that.
Always a pleasure.
And I'd also like to thank Loki for making his debut on the channel as well.
Yeah, if anyone can hear the dog, he's currently snoring next to me, so it's not me being bored, it is the dog.
But he's certainly bored of all this 40k chat, so, but hopefully you guys didn't find it boring, and you tune in next time for another call to arms, and hope that you answer the call. So thanks so much, and thanks Simon, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.